Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Lunch Update, our program that helps you stay curious, connected, informed, live, and in real time. Welcome to the new year, the first one that we've done in 2022. This conversation, like all of our Lunch Update programs, are made possible by our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie, and also a special thank you to our Accelerate sponsor, Baker Tilly. We do record these as we have throughout the pandemic, and if you go to our website at madisonbiz.com, you'll be able to see not only this recording, whether you want to relive something, rehear something, share something, or if you just want to share the whole concept with your friends, we encourage you to go to madisonbiz.com, where you can not just see this recording, but certainly all the other ones that we've done over the pandemic. Coming up, we'll be joined by Madison's Police Chief, Shon Barnes, to discuss his first year in the position, his goals for 2022, and other issues important to business. Before we do that, let me give you a few chamber updates. We're excited to introduce new in-person programming to start off 2022, specifically a new program called Fast Break. Fast Break is the successor to last year's popular Vaccine and Be Seen series. The event will take place, the first one, on February 15th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. at Logic Everyday Community Event Hall. Throughout the year, these networking events will offer a chance for members to start the day with connection or reconnection, along with great coffee and pastries. I will note that proof of full COVID-19 vaccination will be required to attend. I also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Catalent. And if you have a J&J shot or a Moderna shot in your arm, Catalent at some point along in the production cycle and distribution cycle touched those two vaccines, because one of the things they do is produce vaccinations. You can register now at madisonbiz.com. And then also a great update. Last week, we announced the 2022 leadership team for the Chamber's Board of Directors. Our new board chair is Wayne Harris, the longtime CEO of 6 a.m. Marketing. Before being at 6 a.m. Marketing, which was called Gloek Harris Madison, Wayne spent 28 years at McDonald's, including 15 years as an award-winning McDonald's franchisee in the Madison region. He previously served as the Chamber's membership committee chair and our public policy chair last year, where he played a critical role in developing and implementing the Chamber's new 2-year advocacy agenda called Emergence. Two other announced appointments to our executive committee: University Research Park Managing Director Aaron Ulver is now the board chair-elect and the chair of public policy, and Madison Gas and Electric President and CEO Jeff Keebler is now the vice chair and the membership committee chair. I want to give a special thank you to WPS Health Solutions President and CEO Mike Hammerlich for his extraordinary work as board chair in 2021. So please save the date as well on April 13th, when Icebreaker returns in person on the floor of the Kohl Center for the first time in 3 years. This annual luncheon is the only business event on the floor of the Kohl Center, and we cannot wait to have you there as we come back to full life in person and seeing everyone once again. So stay tuned for more details about the event, including speaker and registration information in the coming weeks. But for now, hold April 13th in the lunch hour on the floor of the Kohl Center. And now to our guest. Shon Barnes was hired as the Madison's police chief in February 2021. He was previously the director of training and professional development for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability in Chicago. He also served as the deputy chief of police in Salisbury, North Carolina, as a captain with the Greenboro, North Carolina Police Department, where he began his career as a patrol officer in the fall of 2000. Chief Barnes was honored by the National Institute of Justice as a lead scholar for using innovative technology to reduce crime. He's a member of the National Police Foundation Council on Policing Reform and Race. Chief Barnes received his degree in history and pre-law from Elizabeth City State University in North Carolina and a master's in criminal justice from the University of Cincinnati. He also earned a PhD in leadership studies from the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. Chief, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, sir. How you doing, Zach? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So let's just start kind of how you got here. Like, this is how we got to now. So you spent much of your adult life and career in the South and North Carolina. Then you came up to the Midwest via Chicago. So what drew you from the South and made you in a major metro to Madison? I guess the question everybody probably wants to know is, what made you want to be police chief here?
Well, you know, being a law enforcement leader is something that I've always wanted to do in policing. I just feel that through this profession, I get an opportunity to affect the lives of many people, including the officers. who work. I get a lot of joy out of providing support for our police officers and the work that they do every day. I'm a blue blood in that my only brother is also a police officer as well, and he's a Marine just like I was. And so service has always been something that's run through our family. My father, who's a small business owner, or who was a small business owner, kind of taught us that way. You know, his philosophy about business was that businesses exist to provide a service to the community. The money you get is essentially, you know, your reward for doing good work and doing good service. But yes, I was in North Carolina probably 20 years of my career. I had taken a job in Chicago to be closer to my wife. My wife is Dr. Stephanie Dance Barnes. She is the Dean of the College of Health and Science at DePaul, the most brilliant person that I know. And so it only makes sense. You know, when I first met my wife, she was about to enter medical school at Wake Forest, and I was a public school teacher teaching history. And it made sense for me to be closer to her in med school than it would be for her to live off of my $22,000 a year that I was making as a public school teacher. So I try to make good decisions there, Zach. But I had, you know, applied for the position before I moved to the Chicago area as a deputy chief in Salisbury, North Carolina, just north of Charlotte. But, you know, the processes, they take some time. And what really drew me to Madison is that I have history here. My uncle, who is a graduate of UW-Madison, lived here his entire life. He pastored several churches here before retiring and kind of moving up north to Merrill, Wisconsin. And I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but I believe that's where he lives now. And my mother had actually came to Madison when I was 2 years old. And when I told her about being in the process, she showed me a photo of her in front of Lake Monona as a young mom wanting to move here. And so, you know, I knew a little bit about the community from my uncle and my cousins. I have cousins who live here. And so I knew about the city. But I think the thing that really drew me here was my love of problem-oriented policing. And so, as you know, Herman Goldstein, longtime professor at UW, helped to develop that process for police officers and police departments here in Madison. And this is how I was taught to police. It is, and will always be my core philosophy about how to police. You do it in a way where you look at things as a problem, and there's a model to that. And that's how we do things in North Carolina and Greensboro. And so just to have the opportunity to police and be a part of where it all began was very, very interesting to me. And so I applied and I went through the process. It was a long process. There were some delays where I didn't know what was going on. Obviously, if you were following the news, it took the PFC some time, but I'm glad they did their due diligence. And I'm so grateful to have been selected.
Yeah, well, we're grateful too that you made the decision. I see Francis Huntley Cooper is in the chat, one giving you a shout out, but also letting us know that Salisbury, North Carolina is the home of Cheerwine. So I guess for people who aren't from the South, they may not know what Cheerwine is, but it's a Southern unique beverage, a soda.
Yeah, soda. Yeah, let's say soda. So we have a lot of Southern unique beverages, but this one is non-alcoholic. So I just leave it at that.
That's right. So you started the position during the pandemic, as you said, I mean, and which has affected every aspect of life, whether you were in North Carolina, Chicago, here, no matter where you were, but certainly Greater Madison has felt it. This is kind of a global, sort of big funnel question. I want to narrow it down afterwards, but how have the events of 2020 changed policing? And then specifically, how has it really changed your approach to policing?
Yeah, we're still in a pandemic, and the events of 2020, specifically in Madison, I believe just changed the entire trajectory of policing. I fully understand that I am policing and leading a police department during the most challenging time in the modern day era of policing. I really believe that. In 2020, the department saw 180 days of continuous straight protests in the middle of a pandemic where officers were were being exposed to COVID and still had family members, still had to live in this community. We saw people asking, well, what's the role of policing, challenging traditional policing structures, some rightfully so, and some police officers had to bear the burden of what actually happened in other places. And I cannot forget, and I do want to mention this, because in 2020, the year began with an officer suicide. One of our officers, detective, committed suicide in January of 2020. And that really set the tone for what would be a very, very difficult year for the Madison Police Department. And a lot of people don't know that. And so when I came in, I had to, of course, get that institutional, organizational knowledge and framework. And that's one of the things that I discovered. I discovered that I had a police department that was working really as hard as they could to provide great service, but understood that there would be criticisms, that there would be protests, and that there would be a call for change, that many of them thought that they were not a part of that problem, but wanted to be a part of the solution. And so I began really working on laying down a focus. I began working on strategy, strategic planning. It's one of the things that I think is necessary for anything, working on recommitting ourselves to community policing. And we're certainly working on those things in 2022, excuse me.
Yeah. So you talked about how hard, and that a lot of officers don't see themselves as the root of the problem, but want to be part of the solution of it. My guess is there's also been a change of what does it feel? I mean, when I was a kid, really all the way through up into high school, I wanted to be a police officer. I mean, when you think about heroes, first responders, who and we as a society of kids who we value and who we put on a pedestal, certainly wearing the uniform of a police officer, for many people had that the same draw that you talked about when you were a kid. But my assumption is that makes recruiting more difficult in this moment. That now there's a question mark. I use my own sort of family as an example. For as long as I can remember, my daughter wanted to be a police officer, and frankly, in 2020, she just started to reevaluate. What does it mean to be a police officer? How are you viewed? Can you really drive change? Are you part of a bigger problem? And so I'm curious about how from a staffing and recruiting perspective. And it'd be great if we could talk about it locally, but if you want to talk about it more globally, what are you seeing in your roles in some of these national groups, but also in your leadership here about recruiting people to be the next wave of law enforcement?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is that I still believe that policing is a noble profession. I really believe that. And if you're still interested, Zach, we are hiring for the next academy.
I think I might be outside the age category, but I'll take a look.
Okay. And, we saw the applications drop tremendously in 2020 for our 2021 academy. And, I can't say that all of that is public sentiment. Some of that was the inability to get face-to-face with people and do recruiting trips. We would show up to universities, as we always did, for our recruiting and job career fairs. And they would say, well, we're shut down now. We canceled the job fair. And so those things really affected us. But you're right. The sentiment in 2020 was that it was no longer a noble profession and that it was part of the problem. Now, I will agree that there are some things about policing that I want to change, that we all want to change. But there's still a lot of good, I believe, in policing, and that's what I kind of choose to focus on. And so now we're seeing the numbers of applicants increase again. I think we've almost doubled the applications that we had last year. I'm trying to fill an academy of about 50 people this time. We have a good group of what we call lateral officers. These are officers who are already certified that want to come and work with us. I want to hire about 10 already certified officers, and we have enough application right now to actually do that. In addition to that, we have about 75 applicants that have already made it to the interview process. That means they've already been screened out and we think they're good to go. And we're going to sit down with their applications and talk with them about what it means to be a Madison police officer. And so I fully anticipate being able to fill that. The other side of that is retention. Last year, I lost 12% of my workforce. Now I gained about 28 officers, but I still lost about 45 police officers. I lost, excuse me, more than that, actually. I lost about 45 to resignations, I think, and about another 35 to retirements. And that is a lot. And, what do you say to a young man or a young woman who says, I like policing, but I want to go and do something that's going to give me more time with my family at night, or I want to go and I want to do something that's going to decrease my opportunities of getting COVID. I had an employee that worked for me who had COVID, but never quite got his breath back, his stamina, and it really bothered him, and he had to leave us. And so there are a lot of things that are in play, which is why I state this is the toughest time I can think in the era of policing. I saw a recent CNN story that described this era in our history as the Great Resignation. And people are leaving their jobs. I don't know if some of the business owners on this call are experiencing the same, but they're leaving professions that almost never had attrition issues: nursing, teaching, manufacturing. People are starting businesses, which is great. I love businesses, but people are just leaving their jobs and trying to find greener pastures. And it's something that is affecting our police department.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you talked about, I read somewhere that you have a long-term goal of overseeing a class, an academy class, where people of color are the majority. What do you think it's going to take to get Madison to that place where we could see an academy class that's 51% people of color?
Yeah, it's going to take active recruiting. Most police departments advertise, they don't recruit. And recruitment is a verb, it's an action. You think about your favorite college basketball team, which I'm sure is UW-Madison. The coaches go out and they actually recruit. They call parents, they call family members, teachers, things of that nature. I think we need to do that. I'm also working on a program that we're developing called the MORE program. It stands for Minority Officers Recruiting Effort, and the definition of minority is expanded to include all categories of minorities. But specifically what the program does is it creates a bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. And so a college sophomore or junior who's eligible to be a police officer can apply to the program, and we will stay connected to that person throughout their college journey. And we want to be able to provide them with visits to Madison. We want to be able to provide them with opportunities to explore Madison, go to football games and things of that nature, do ride-alongs, and keep them connected. And what we will promise them is that once they graduate from their university, that they will have a job waiting for them. And this is where, our Chamber of Commerce can help. And so if we have a cohort of 10 people, we may need help, maybe getting tickets to a game, or if we want to, have them meet the Chamber of Commerce, maybe, real estate, maybe there's some people who are in the chamber that can help a young man or a young woman figure out housing here in Madison, because the truth of the matter is we don't have the population here in Madison to get the numbers that we want. We're going to have to look outside. We're going to have to go to the South, the West, the Midwest. And when we bring them here, we'll need help making them feel welcome and helping them navigate the landscape of Madison.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a relatable goal for employers, right? I mean, you said, if the business leaders on the call, what are they facing? They're facing the same challenges. One, the funnel isn't as wide as we need it to be. And certainly there's diversification challenges across every employer within this region. The chamber is working on some initiatives around recruitment and retention, particularly of people of color, but part of that will also be a college outreach strategy. And so I think for sure we should talk about the MORE program and how we can align those so that the officers are benefiting from the same infrastructure that we're going to build for recruitment of directors and managers within, local employers. So I'm appreciative that you're undertaking that. Sounds like a great program, and we look forward to being partners in that. When you think back, just all over 2020, but maybe even beyond the events of 2020, I'd say everybody in the workforce, every manager is feeling this sense of a fatigue and a stress within their workforce. And certainly in high stress professions like law enforcement, policing, I can only imagine that it's not just there, but it is even more heightened than what we see in the private sector. Tell us about how the officers are feeling right now. I mean, what is morale? What is the feeling? How is the health of Madison PD?
I think the police officers are trying to redefine what it means to be supported. And, often, when I speak with officers, that is the constant theme. They want to feel supported. And then I dig a little bit deeper and I say, well, tell me what it means to be supported. And they talk about everything from people who judge them not by their own actions, but by the actions of an officer in another state. They want to be supported by me. And I certainly support my police officers. I read a comment, which I was told never to do, but I read a Facebook comment where someone says, the chief doesn't support his officers. I'm like, where I'm from, those are fighting words, right? Because we call that an all-out lie where I'm from. But nevertheless, they want to be supported. And so I spend time talking with them. For example, I do a monthly, I call it Chat with the Chiefs. It's on Zoom format right now because of the pandemic, where we give them an opportunity to come and talk. We do district in-services where I get an opportunity to talk with the officers about what they're feeling. On Fridays, I try to visit the substations and just sit in the break room and talk. And just like with anyone, the officers want to be heard, and they really want to be judged by their own actions. They want to be judged as individuals. Now, I understand that policing is global, and part of my responsibility is explaining that to them. Later this month, next month rather, we're going to be launching some small group sessions around recruitment, retention, and morale. And so I'll be sitting down in small groups of about 10 officers going around the substations at multiple times during the midday and at night, because some of our officers, quite frankly, night works better for their schedules, to hear what they want from me in regards to morale. I understand that morale is an everyone issue. And right now it's not where I'm comfortable. It's not where I want it to be. And that's not just officers, by the way. That's also our commission and our non-commissioned staff. We have about 100 civilian employees who do a wonderful job for us. And I want those employees to feel appreciated as well. But one of the number one things that I hear, Zach, and I will share this with you, is the lack of parking downtown. And if there's anyone on the call who can help me with that problem, I will give you my personal cell phone, because I had an officer say, we're paying to come to work, or we can't find parking. It's just it's a historical problem. And if I could find the answer to parking, that would make me a hero. So if someone has any ideas about parking downtown, I will certainly be willing to listen to that.
Yeah, or MPPOA could put it in the next contract negotiation, I guess, too. All right. So on a serious note, I think there's a moment of opportunity and maybe risk I want to talk about. When you look around the Madison region, there are several law enforcement leaders who are people of color. And I think, I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, that it's the most law enforcement leaders of color that we've ever had in this region. Included in that, or on top of that, or in addition to that, the chief justice, chief judge of our juvenile court is a Black man. Our county sheriff is a Black man. Our district attorney is a Black man. We have leaders of color in law enforcement at levels that we've maybe never seen before. And like I said, to me, this seems like there's an opportunity here, but there's also a risk when we talk about systemic change. How do you see that? How do you see this development? Is it opportunity? Is it risk? Is it both? How do you see it?
I think it's opportunity. Obviously, talent without opportunity means nothing. And I think that we have a talented group of African-American leaders. I think we've always had a talented group of African-American leaders here in Madison, but talent without opportunity means nothing. And so now we have the opportunity to make change. But as one of my professors, Dr. Edward Fort, Chancellor Emeritus at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, who's still teaching at probably age 85, once told me, he said, Shon, leadership is dangerous. And I was like, it's dangerous? And he says, yes, because leadership involves making decisions that are sometimes unpopular. Leadership, true leadership, involves sometimes challenging the status quo, and people do not want that. And so leadership is dangerous. And I know about that firsthand in my entire career. Every time I've had a leadership opportunity, I've always challenged the process. I've encouraged others to be better than they thought that they could be. And to me, that's what the whole leadership process is about. But as I reflect on my last year, it is risky. And Zach, I will share this with you. One of my first emails that I received was an email from a citizen welcoming me to Madison, and it was laden with the N-word, right? And I kept that. I kept that, number one, as a reminder that everyone isn't happy about Black leadership. And I also kept the email to just look at it from time to time to remind myself that you can never work hard enough. You just can't. And that's just how I was raised. My father was a mechanic, so I know something about hard work, sun up to sundown. You don't stop until the job is done. It helps to motivate me. I think that if you were to talk to Black leaders, they'll tell you it's tough making change. They'll tell you that oftentimes there's a double standard. You get questioned more. You have to have details ironed out before you present the idea, or sometimes your ideas will get discredited. I think my personal experience is that the media, some members of the media are very biased against us in our opinion. There's this level of scrutiny that we all expected from the media, but there are certain members of the media that I think want to sell papers based on things that aren't positive. And there are a lot of positive things that are going on. There are some negative things too. And all we ask for is fair and balanced reporting, which quite frankly is not always the case here in Madison.
Well, Chief, I'm sorry to hear that you received a letter like that, but I'm also appreciative and thankful that that didn't dissuade you, right? That emboldened you and empowered you to come here and make a change. So thank you for that. And one of your predecessors, Chief David Cooper, instituted community policing as an approach to Madison. If you've been around for a while, certainly his name sort of rings in the halls of City Hall and of MPD. Another predecessor that was well liked and certainly still has a thumbprints all over this community is Chief Noble Ray, who brought the focus on bias, both conscious and unconscious bias, and its effects on policing. I've heard you talk about you have a mission to police in the quote Madison way. And what does that mean to you? When we talk about the Madison way, what does that mean? And then how do you build on the work of your predecessors in doing that?
Yeah, and I have heard David Cooper's name once or twice, I think, since I've been here. But no, we are friends, and we've had conversations before. He comes by to visit me, as well as Noble Ray as well. I do appreciate what they have done for this police department. I will say, for me, the Madison way is a specific way of policing. Number one is focused on community harms. And what that means is we often think about police responding to crimes. Well, not all community harms are crimes, but that doesn't mean we can't help. And so I want a police department that is a community helper. And so community harm could be anything from someone who is unsheltered and they are out in front of a business and they may be hungry or they may be cold. We have a role to play in that. Not only does it help the business, but it also helps that person. And I reject the idea that, police departments shouldn't be involved in helping people. I totally reject that idea. When it comes to mental health, our police officers have more hours training of mental health than almost anyone other than a psychologist. And I'll put that up against anyone who thinks that we don't have a role to play in that. And so I reject the idea that we cannot influence community harm. So the Madison, my definition of the Madison method is that we're going to be harm focused, not just crime focused, but harm focused too. We're going to be intelligence led. We're going to let crime analytics and data influence our decisions. We're going to be problem oriented. We're going to use the problem solving method of Herman Goldstein, scanning problems, analysis, response, assessment, and making sure that our responses are sustainable. We don't want business owners calling us back in 6 months saying the problem has returned. So if there's a solution, it should be sustainable. And those solutions should also be evidence-based. And what I mean by evidence-based is that they should be based on the most empirical research needed to solve that problem. And so the idea is not just picking the right response, but picking the right dosage. And that's what police departments have missed. That's why we have civil unrest. That's why we have police departments who are under consent decrees, because they may understand response, but the dosage is the most important part. If I have a headache, I could take 2 ibuprofen and my headache could go away. I could also take 50 ibuprofen and my headache would go away too, but it would go away forever. And so in policing, the idea is to make sure that I understand dosage, not too much and not too little, but also enough to solve the problem and then move on to something else.
You highlighted technology as one of the things that you're going to include in the Madison Way. And I also noticed in reading your first 100-day report from last summer that you highlighted this desire to lead in technology innovation, certainly something that's intrinsic to the future of Madison's economy. And as I said in your bio, you're also honored by the National Institutes of Justice as a lead scholar in innovation technology. And so it's certainly something that you have a national reputation for and a desire to implement here. And certainly technology innovation is something that's relatable for most business leaders listening to this call. They're all thinking about what the future of technology and innovation looks like. So when you talk about technology, how do you see that changing the way that communities are policed?
Well, I am a competitive person by nature. And so innovation to me is just, a race to use the resources that you have available to solve a problem. As a young police officer working a beat, we were taught to take ownership of our area. And I had a business area. And in that area, I had a gentleman who was breaking into businesses at night, and I could not catch him. And, it was just like I was taking these reports almost every Wednesday or Thursday night. And so I went and I spoke with our crime analyst group. I didn't even know what a crime analyst group did. And I said, hey, what's going on here? And they started looking at some data, and they said, this guy's going to come back next Wednesday. And I was like, are you sure? And I was like, if these reports are right, he'll be back next Wednesday. And so, we did, I guess you would call it a stakeout, or our version of a stakeout. And sure enough, I heard the glass break from my car I heard it just like, still remember it. And I said, well, I got you now. And sure enough, I was waiting for him when he came through that window. And I was sold on the idea of using data and technology to solve a crime. I didn't have the time to sit out there 24 hours a day, but what I did have available to me was some data and some technology. And not only was I able to stop that rash of commercial burglaries, but I think the business owners appreciated it, because no one wants to show up to work to open a business and have to sweep up glass. And then in one case, I remember the owners being open and sweeping up glass and still taking money from people. And I had to move to the side because I didn't want them to miss out on revenue just because I had to take a report, and that really stuck with me. But when it comes to innovation, there is a lot going on in policing. I went to a conference recently in Phoenix, Arizona. They have drones now that will project your photo to suspects that you may be talking to who are barricaded or who are suicidal. And you can see them and they can see you. It's an amazing thing. They have technology now that when you're pulled over, if you have an app on your phone, you can communicate with the police officer without having to get out of your car. They have sticky goo, I guess you will call it, that will project from the front of a police cruiser's car on a fleeing suspect's car with GPS. And so now you can back off. The suspect doesn't even know it. You can set up a perimeter and you can bring him into custody without causing risk to your community. We have data analytics that will help predict where crime will be, where crime is now, and help you to narrow down some of your prolific offenders, which is really the goal of policing, which is crime prevention. I want to be on the front of that. I do not want to read in the magazine about another police department that has a research and development group, and they're testing out ways to make policing safer and to make communities feel safer. I want other people to read about us.
Yeah. So let's talk about something that's, I guess, going to be a bit controversial. That's body worn cameras. It's been debated in this community for a number of years. You've expressed support for a 1-year pilot program for the body worn cameras by officers. The city council, common council recently pushed that decision back until at least April. What do you think the future of body worn cameras is in Madison?
Well, I think the future is more education. I have 4 public seminars and 1 public hearing, official public hearing, coming up starting in February. So starting February the 10th, every Thursday, we'll do either a virtual or an in-person seminar on the community impact of body-worn cameras. Axon, a company who we do business with, they manufacture our tasers. They're going to come in and do 2 presentations for us. And Panasonic, that manufactures our in-car dash cameras, we're going to come in and do presentations for us. And then we'll have a public meeting. During that time, I'll have a researcher come and talk about what my plans are for the body-worn camera pilot study. In addition to that, the Axon and Panasonic will be there to answer questions, and I will present the model body-worn camera policy. We are a little bit late to the party when it comes to body-worn cameras. My time in Greensboro, I was a part of the initial body-worn camera pilot project in 2012. 2 years before Mike Brown in Ferguson, our police department outfitted patrol officers with body-worn cameras. And so some of the things that people are worried about, the technology has already caught up to those worries. For example, officers intentionally turning off body-worn camera footage. That's really not possible anymore. Once the camera is activated, whether it's on or off, we can still retrieve that footage if we were to need it. Cameras falling off of officers, the viewpoint of the officers, they've expanded the optics of it. Redaction is easier now. You can pixelate photos and numbers easily, almost in an automatic sense. So a lot of the things that we're concerned about, because we're a little bit late to this party, have already been fixed. And so I want to do some community education about it. I think we need body-worn cameras so that everyone is held accountable. People say, well, I don't want body-worn cameras because it doesn't hold officers accountable. And I would say I disagree with that. Body-worn cameras holds everyone accountable. And so it's a unbiased view of what's going on. I know some people are not in favor of it, but I think if they would carefully read the literature and carefully talk to probably the 70% of police agencies that have them, I think there's only one other agency in the entire county that does not have body-worn cameras. So we're a little bit late to the party.
Something that we often hear, I suspect you probably do too, both within the community and frankly from other parts of the state. We were recently in DC, and I had a congressman from another part of the state tell me how unsafe Madison is. And I just said I just disagree with those perceptions, but we certainly hear it, right? There's a perception out there that Madison is experiencing more crime. We certainly see it being reported more. There's a feeling out there that Madison's less safe. What do you see? What do you say to people that perceive Madison as less safe today than it was before?
No, I think there's a fear of crime, and then there's a rate of crime. So our rate of crime is relatively low, but I will admit our fear of crime is relatively high. One of the reasons is because certainly since I've been here, I've tried to communicate more with our community. When there's a rash of anything, whether it's, flower pots stolen from front porches or car thefts, I try to communicate that to our community. I try to speak with the media when I can about crime. Certainly, we've had an increase in gun crime, but that's been happening for the last 3 years. And so I think our communication has been getting better. I think we do not do a good enough job of follow through. I think that most of our cases, we do develop a suspect and we bring that suspect to justice, but we need to do a better job of explaining that to the community that yes, we may have reported on this gun crime, this car theft, but not only did we recover the property, but the person has been held accountable for that. We also need help with other parts of the criminal justice system. There is a revolving door here in Madison. I had my analysis group do a study, and we looked at juvenile offenders. And so we found about 8 juveniles that were basically in and out of the system. And when that happens, it tells me that there's a tipping point where the juvenile feels that maybe I should do the next crime because I've already have 3 and 4 and I haven't gone to court yet, or I haven't been adjudicated yet. And so we have to make sure that we all stand together. And this is where I certainly need help from the business community. I'm not suggesting that we go on this lock them up, whatever strategies that we did in the 90s. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I am suggesting is that for gun crimes and stolen autos, 2 things that I think are contributing to the perception that Madison is unsafe, that we challenge everyone in the criminal justice system, including me, including our district attorneys, including our judges, to say enough is enough. If it's stolen cars or if it's gun crime, we have to hold those persons accountable to the fullest extent of the law. We can be successful without that, but I promise you, if we get that buy-in from other parts of the criminal justice system, and the community's voice is the voice that's asking for this, not me, but the community's voice, including our business community, we will change that perception immediately.
You mentioned at the beginning, and when you and I had coffee recently, you told me the story about your dad, as a small business owner, and certainly you grew up with the benefits and risks of having a family that owned a small business. What do you want businesses to know about the department, and the department specifically under your leadership?
I think I want them to know that the business community is a vital part of the community, as well as the police department. And I think that I need the business communities to work more on social or corporate social responsibility. And what I mean by that is we need to see the business community partner with us on things, that sweat equity. I'm not asking for money, but what I am asking for is hire within the community, hire a young man or a young woman from a marginalized community. We talk a lot about mentorship, but I really believe that apprenticeship is better than mentorship, right? Because a mentor is someone that you choose. And so you have to be chosen to be someone's mentor. You're not going to do that if they don't know you, but you can choose someone to be your apprentice. Show them how to organize a business. Show them how to run a business. And I think we're going to get a lot from that. And if you think about some of the civil unrest that we've seen across the country, one thing that I will tell you is that those businesses that were connected to the community were unimpacted. You can go all the way back to the Watts riots in '68, I think, and go all the way up to the Klan Nazi shootings in Greensboro in 1979. Those businesses that are connected to the community, they don't have those problems. You saw that also during the Freddie Gray thing. They don't like businesses that they feel don't support the community, and so we have to help create that. And so that's what I would ask from the business community. And if you need help with that, we do have a community policing section within the police department, and there's certainly opportunities, and I can share some of those with you at a later time if you like.
Great. So we have 1 minute left, Chief. And
okay.
So the last question is, what's the most important thing you learned about yourself during the pandemic?
The most important thing I learned about myself is that every day is an opportunity to be better. And I look at it like that. I learned that I end the day, every day, on something positive, whether it's walking into a lineup to see a group of young officers, getting ready for work, or whether it's attending a community meeting. I end the day on something positive, and I begin the day knowing that I have an opportunity, a great opportunity, to improve the lives of a great community, and it makes me happy. And so that's what I've learned about myself in 2020.
Well said. And I know I said at the beginning, I would say it again. Thank you for the commitment. Thanks for coming here and helping us do better and be better. So with that, again, I want to thank the Chief for joining us. Thank all of you for being here with us today. And as always, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Perkins Coie. So everyone take care and have a great rest of your day.